I'm Renee Williams.
And I'm Billy Thomas.
And welcome to another edition of From the Woods Today. You know, Billy, we talk about a lot of things on this show, and trees and wildlife and everything in between. And trees provide us they provide us shade, clean water, clean air, habitat for animals. I mean, it seems like that, it's just an abundance of things. And so today we're talking about abundance of things as well.
No doubt. Renee, I'm glad to be with you today. As always, this show it covers a lot of ground, as you said. It really does. And today we're going to be talking with Martha Yount. Martha has been with us before, but she is part of the Cooking Wild program that's here in the state. And it's basically taken some of that wildlife that we have, some of that game wildlife, and turning it into amazing recipes. So she's got a really cool recipe. I won't reveal that just yet. We'll let you find out what the Cooking Wild recipe is here in a minute. But we're thankful to have Martha with us. Just keep in mind, too, that Martha and a lot of the folks in Eastern Kentucky are still suffering heavily from the recent flood. So let's keep them in mind and find ways to help where we can. But we've also got one of our guests from the Kentucky Division of Forestry, Alexandra Blevins. She's our forest health specialist, and she's been working with Dr. Crocker as always. And Dr. Crocker is going to be on with us as well. So we're going to be talking about some lingering ash. There are a few of these ash trees that are still kind of hanging on. It seems like being past the emerald ash borer wave that's come through. And then we're also going to be talking about another one, which, we don't want, Asian Longhorn Beetle. So we're thankful to have Dr. Crocker and Alexandra and Martha with us for this program. And thank you all for being with us as well. We appreciate your attendance. If you have any questions for our presenters, please use the chat function in Zoom, or you can use the comment section of Facebook Live and we'll respond accordingly. But excited about today's show, Renee.
Definitely. So, let's go ahead and get started with that recipe. Martha, if you want to go ahead and come on. Hi, good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for letting me join you today. And I'm going to apologize for my human tripod.
You're doing great, Martha. Thank you.
We appreciate you doing it. I wasn't even sure you'd be able to be on today. I know you're swamped down there helping all of the flood victims, and we greatly appreciate all that you're doing.
Well, it's good to be able to be flexible. So, and there's so many people that are here that are doing way more than I ever could. So I'm glad that I can do a little bit here and there. But thanks for inviting me to talk about Cook Wild Kentucky, because that's one of my favorite things. Mm-hmm. And I'll do a quick recap about what it is. Some of you are very familiar, but some of you may not have heard about it yet. And so this started maybe 4 years ago, I think, and it's actually a food accessibility issue. And so we had, there's a national group, Hunters for the Hungry, and there's a chapter of that here in Kentucky, and they were donating venison to our food pantries, which is fabulous because it's a very healthy lean protein. It's abundant here in Kentucky. Sometimes too abundant if you've ever encountered one with your vehicle.
Yeah, exactly.
And so what the food pantries found out was that people were a little bit hesitant to take it if they weren't familiar with it. And so they contacted the Nutrition Education Program, which is part of Family and Consumer Sciences Extension at the University of Kentucky, because we work with healthy recipes all the time. And so it really just snowballed from that. Jan Nappage is the lead on this. She's been working at the top of the ladder on it. And I love to get to work with the recipes and share them with people. I'm going to the state fair on Saturday to do a couple of recipes there. So it started out with that, what do we do with this ground venison? And then it has now grown to 34 recipes using 13 different species. We also have 2 publications finished. We have an introduction to cooking with wild game. We have the fish publication that's finished. Venison is in the works, so that has a little more information than just a recipe card. And it's really turned into a fun thing and something that so many Kentuckians can enjoy. It is not just limited to those who might receive venison from the food pantry. We have so many people that hunt. We have landowners that want somebody to hunt to get the excess deer out of their property. And then we've done different species that will never show up in your food pantry, but they're ones that do show up on Kentucky tables.
Mhm.
So it's been a good thing. And today we're going to feature one of those. We're going to make a squirrel pie, a squirrel pot pie.
Yeah.
And so if you're a woodland owner, you know that you probably have some squirrels living in your forest.
Yes.
And I think I meant to check this morning and I just didn't get to it. I think we're in squirrel season right now. And if not, it's coming up shortly. So you'd have an opportunity to do some hunting on that.
Yes.
So Renee, if you don't mind showing the recipe, I'm going to turn off this camera and get my other one turned on.
All right.
Okay, and so Renee is showing us the recipe, and all of these recipes, I have to do a little note about the nutrition education program, because all of our recipes have to meet a certain standard. They meet the dietary guidelines for Americans. That means they're limited in sodium. That's the hard one to do. Limited in sodium, fat, saturated fat. They also have to be inexpensive and simple to prepare, which makes them perfect recipes for everyone, because none of us have a whole lot of extra time just to cook, unless you really enjoy that. But all of our recipes that you find at www.planeatmove. And after we get through here, I'll put that in the chat so you can find it, or maybe Renee can. Oh, thank you. You all are so good. And you can find not only all of the Cook Wild recipes, but also many, many, many more recipes. And you know that they will all meet the dietary guidelines for Americans. Plus, they have to be inexpensive to prepare, and they don't require any specialty equipment. So we'll look at the squirrel pot pie recipe, and we'll read the ingredients, and then we'll go to the camera and start looking at them. But you do need 2 squirrels. You can cook them and then prepare this pot pie right away. But what I did was I cooked 6 squirrels and divided them up. And so I had 2 squirrels and some squirrel broth in the freezer in different containers so that I could get out just what I needed. I'll be using some more of that squirrel with other recipes later on. But you need 2 squirrels. And if they're gray squirrels, they're going to be a little smaller. It's not going to be a whole lot of meat. And you can use the squirrel broth, but you're cooking it in chicken broth. We're going to thicken that with some flour, and we're going to add some vegetables. So this is a pot pie. You may have had a very similar one made with chicken. And if you don't have squirrel, but you want to try this recipe, you can do that with chicken. Okay. So we've got mushrooms, celery, onion, mixed vegetables, some seasonings, and we're going to use a pie crust. All right, well, thank you, Renee, and I'm going to move over to the camera and get started cooking.
All right, sounds great.
Okay, so it's not real sharp and clear. We're doing the best we can with our setup, but squirrel itself this is the meat from 2 squirrels. It's been cooked and picked off the bones. So that does take a little bit of time to pick that meat off. But you can see that it looks sort of like dark meat from chicken. It has a nice mild flavor, and you can substitute it in any recipe that you would use cooked chicken in. Then we have our vegetables: celery, onion, some mushrooms, some frozen mixed vegetables, and we're going to thicken up our broth. So before I put this in the saucepan, the directions tell you to put the flour in a bowl and mix the broth in a little bit at a time. But here's one of my shortcuts. I put the flour, 4 tablespoons of flour, in this jar with a tight-fitting lid. If it's not a tight-fitting lid, it won't. You'll regret that. So a tight-fitting lid, and I poured our measured broth, a little bit of it in the jar, and now I'm just going to shake it up. And that's an easier way to dissolve that flour and get it blended in, because you know how flour likes to lump. Then we're going to put the rest of our broth in a saucepan and get that going. All right. Looks like we've got a little yellow flame. I'm going to try to adjust that and get a more blue flame, which will be hotter. Okay, so I've got my flour and that small amount of broth well dissolved. And I'm just going to add it to this remaining broth and stir it. So that's a very easy way to get that flour in there without making lumps. And I know a lot of times we might use a recipe that called for a can of cream of chicken soup or cream of mushroom soup, but all of our canned soups like that are really high in sodium. So about 1/3 of Kentuckians, and I'm one of those 1/3, have high blood pressure, and sodium is one of the things that we really need to limit to try to keep our blood pressure at the right level. Part of that comes with age, but we haven't found any way to take care of that. All right, so I'm going to let this just come to a boil and thicken. It won't take very long. Well, I lost that train of thought. We have several recipes in Cook Wild that use squirrel, but the squirrel pot pie is the one that really features it. We have a burgoo that uses several different meats, and squirrel's really good in that. Now, I get asked all the time, will we ever have a recipe for squirrel dumplings? And I don't know if we can get that to fit in our requirements, but we'll keep experimenting. We're still working on the raccoon and sweet potatoes recipe because we haven't gotten that where it is. It's just not good enough yet, because we do want it to taste good, even though we make sure that it's healthy. There's no point in making a healthy food if no one wants to eat it. And while I'm filling in time, stirring this and waiting for it to come to a boil, we do have several recipes for venison. That was how we started out, was with venison recipes. And then we have Jan can say these off in a fast spiel, but it takes me a little bit longer. So we have venison. We do have duck, dove, elk, squirrel, beaver, rabbit. I've lost track there. And we have several fish recipes. So we have some for crappie, we have trout, and we have a couple of other fish recipes that are really good for any mild fish. So if you like to fish, you can find some new ways to cook it. I tell people that no, it will never taste quite as good as that fried fish, but we probably shouldn't eat fried fish every day. And fish is a healthy food. So if we can find other ways to cook it, then we can enjoy fish more often. And Kentucky has so many waterways that fish is readily available, and it's fun to go fishing. So if you have only fished for sport before, you might decide you want to start keeping some of your catch and try out some of our recipes. Okay, so we've come to a boil now, and I'm going to let this boil about 1 more minute so that it can thicken some. It will thicken a little bit more in the oven while it's baking. And you see I had to lift it up off this gas burner to slow the temperature down just a bit. All right, and I think we're close to 1 minute. So we'll turn that off. And I'm using the small saucepan today because it's the one that I could find. My office did flood, and I have a lot of my things piled up on the front porch that I could salvage. And so some of my cookware is not readily available. So we've got that thickened up, and now we're going to add our squirrel meat. So again, this was off of 2 small gray squirrels. So a fox squirrel will give you a little bit more meat. And then we'll add our onion. Onion adds a lot of flavor to everything. Some chopped celery, sliced mushrooms. I'm going to stir a little bit because my pan's getting pretty full. And we'll see if we can make room for our seasoning. So we have some salt, pepper, and garlic powder. And I'll get that stirred in, and then I'll add our last vegetable ingredient. And so that's a cup of, they can be frozen mixed vegetables or canned, no salt added. And then we're going to use a deep dish pie plate. I'm not sure if that shows up very well on my black tray, but you'll see that I'm not just pouring this mixture out onto the tray. So the vegetables are not pre-cooked. They'll cook in the oven while it's baking. And we have, that's a good looking mixture already with all those colorful vegetables in there. And then I'm cheating today and using a ready-made pie crust, but you can certainly make your own if you like to do that. And since this is a pot pie, it only has a crust on the top. We'll see if I can get that in place. And then now to make it pretty, because we do want our food to look nice too, I'm just going to crimp the edge of the pie crust. I'm just pinching it between my fingers and thumb to make a little fluted design. My grandmother always used a fork, and she would just press a fork all the way around the edge to make a pretty design. And either way looks fine, and you can leave it just like you put it on there, but that little finishing touch makes it pretty. And I realize now that I forgot to bring a knife out of the kitchen. So when I take this downstairs and put it in the oven, I will use a knife and just cut a few slits in the top so it can vent and let this bubble up while it's cooking. All right, so that's ready to go to the oven. And Renee and Billy, I'm going to run downstairs and put this in the oven, and then I'll be back up later to answer questions. And then hopefully by the end of this, we might have a pie ready to look at.
Martha,
Ready for lunch.
awesome.
Yeah.
I'm telling you what, it's like you have taught me so much already. I was like, why did I never think to put flour in my thing and just mix it up? Because I'm always sitting there stirring, trying to get the lumps out. I was like, oh my gosh. So,
Martha will take care of us, that's for sure.
she
All right.
definitely will. All right, so we'll see what that pie is.
Yeah, while she's cooking. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. While she's cooking, let's move on to
Yeah.
something we don't want in our woods.
Well, are we going lingering ash or are we going ALB?
ALB.
Oh, yeah. So unfortunately, not unfortunately that we have Alexandra, but unfortunately we do have an insect out there that is posing some real risk to our woodlands and forests. Alexandra, thanks for being with us today.
Well, special thanks to you, Billy and Renee, for the invitation to, speak yet again on From the Woods today. I just can't get enough of it.
So that's good because we love having you on. So.
Yeah.
Well, I really do appreciate it to share this knowledge. So let me go ahead and get my PowerPoint up, and it looks like it's ready to go. Is everyone seeing that okay?
Yep, looks great.
All right, and before I start, I will say Martha made it really hard to follow her, and I am already salivating. That pie looked amazing, and hopefully I'm not going to ruin everyone's appetites right now talking about this nasty bug. So with that, welcome everyone to today's discussion. We are going to be talking about the Asian longhorn beetle, which you can see pictured here crawling out of its exit hole. So as you can see, this is a wood-boring insect, and it's actually an exotic invasive insect that we do not want. And so it's an emerging pest. So thankfully, Kentucky, we do not have this insect that in our state to date. And I will say, there is kind of a hesitancy when I say that, because honestly, we're not really sure when it will arrive, but just give it some time, and unfortunately, it will most likely get here. But we're doing our best to monitor for this insect within the Kentucky Division of Forestry's Forest Health Program, but we need all the help that we can get. So we're going to discuss what to look for and the status quo of this insect to date, and then how you all listening can help us here at KDF. So with that, we'll go ahead and jump right in. Okay, so what exactly are we dealing with here? So as the name implies, this is an insect that hails from Asia, and it's got these long horns. What exactly are they talking about when they call it a longhorn beetle? So we're gonna dive right into all the characteristics of this insect. So first of all, this is a very large and in charge insect. And to me, it kind of is neat. It looks polka dotted. It's not your average, very organized polka dot pattern, but to me, it kind of looks like polka dots. So you can keep that in the back of your mind. If you see any insects that have these black and white spots, that's a major red flag. So you might want to look at it a little bit closer. And so how big are these little bugs? Well, they can actually grow to 1 inch to 1.5 inches in length in their adult form, as you can see here. And another key characteristic, within this blue circle, it's a little hard to see on that foot, but on this back leg, you might be able to see it a little bit better. They actually have blue legs and feet. So not a lot of other beetles are going to have that characteristic. So if you've got the polka dots and blue feet and legs, you should really be on high alert. And lastly, as its name implies, we've got these long horns, but they're actually the insect's antenna. And the key thing to notice is that they actually surpass the insect's body length. So these are some really long horns or antenna. So if you've got those 3 things, you're going to want to try your best to get a photo of that insect or capture that insect and let someone know. But the key takeaway is that this adult form of the insect isn't what's actually harming our trees. It is the grub or the immature version or stage of this insect that's doing all the damage to trees. So as you can see here, you might have thought the adult was really crazy looking. Well, the grub is nasty. This is it in its final development stage. So right before it goes through metamorphosis and becomes the adult. So this is a large and in charge grub. And as you can probably imagine, these insects feed and feast on wood at an alarming rate. So this individual is holding this grub and it's taking up pretty much the entirety of their palm. So you aren't really likely to see the grubs. You're more likely to see the adult form. But say if a branch were to fall off of a tree, one of these grubs might fall out. So you probably won't see them, but it's good to know about it just in case. And so we talked about the damage. So here you're seeing a pile of maple stems that have been completely devastated by this grub. And so as you can see, they have this interesting carrot feeding habit where they will actually feed all the way into the heartwood or the interior wood of these trees. And as you can probably imagine, this leads to a decline in the structural integrity of these trees, and it leads to hazards to human health and property. So we're very concerned when this beetle arrives in Kentucky. So now that we talked about what to look for, when and where, and what's kind of the status quo of this insect to date. So here we're looking at the most up-to-date map from the USDA and their program for eradicating this insect. So as you can see, there's kind of a lot of moving parts on this map. So we're going to break it down into 4 key takeaways. So the first thing that I wanted to mention, when did this beetle arrive in the States? It was actually first detected in New York in 1996. So it's been here for a while. And since then, it has moved around quite a bit. So some good news, we'll talk about the good news first. So you can see these 2 green check marks. There's one in New Jersey and one over here in Illinois. And what that means is that these two states have actually successfully eradicated this insect after they have infested certain areas. So that is really awesome news. We know that we can eradicate these insects with a lot of manpower and time and money, but it is possible. So that's really great to know. But the flip side of that coin, so the bad news is that these insects are still active in these 3 states, Massachusetts, New York, and Ohio. So, you know, even though it was detected in New York back in 1996, it's still active to this day. So that just goes to show you that it's very difficult to eradicate these bugs once they're established. And before we jump into that last point, you know, I mentioned Ohio. So if we zoom in and look at where it was detected in Ohio, that's in Claremont County, and that's only 10 miles north of our Kentucky border. So having said that, we are constantly on the lookout in the northern regions of Kentucky, looking for any types of signs of this beetle and its damage. So I'll ask folks that are in those northern counties, if you're seeing anything strange, please let me know. And so lastly, it was just found in South Carolina in 2020, and they are actually still seeing you know, these beetles down there. The last detection, it says, was in April 2022. And I personally know some of the folks that are working to eradicate this insect down in South Carolina, and it is a difficult task. So, you know, we're trying our best to not have it show up in Kentucky, but we need all the help that we can get. And so, you know, you might be asking, why is it here? How did it get here? Well, you know, we are living in modern times, and with that comes, you know, the great things about modern times, and trade is one of them, but it has its downfalls. So here you can see this giant cargo ship, and on these cargo ships, we've got these containers, and most likely inside some of these containers, we're going to have this wood dunnage, or, you know, the wood packaging materials. And, you know, these wood-boring insects, they will eventually, you know, end up in some of these materials. And it's the case for ALB, or the Asian Longhorn Beetle, as well as the emerald ash borer. They were believed to have been brought into the States through this very exact process. So, you know, they'll escape from this dunnage and not be detected by, you know, our patrols through APHIS and things like that. And they'll escape into the wild and start the destruction on our natural landscapes. So now that we've kind of went through all the basics for ALB, and, you know, how it got here and what it looks like and what to look for, you know, the last question is, how can you all help? So I've mentioned, you know, several times that I need all the help that I can get, and we're not in this battle alone. So we need everyone to be on the lookout to spot the signs and stop this beetle. So this is a pretty awesome graphic from the USDA's program for the ALB eradication. And so we're going to go through this step by step and kind of describe what you can be looking for. So first off, the adult female beetles will lay these egg niches, or they will make these egg niches where they'll lay their eggs. And it comes in the form of what appears as these, and I apologize, these are pretty small images, but they'll kind of chew away like a little divot in the bark of these trees, and that's where they're going to lay their eggs. And so that's one thing that you can look for. And as you can see, it's kind of a different color than the outer bark, so it kind of make it stand out a little bit more. And then we'll hop over here to the exit hole. And so these are really large holes, about the size of a dime, and they're perfectly round. They almost seem like they were pre-drilled. So if you're noticing any, you know, really perfectly round holes in your trees, please report that. And then thirdly, we'll talk about frass. So I'm sure it's probably been mentioned on this program before, but frass is just a fancy entomological term that all it really means is this is insect excrement or bug poop, okay? So, not the greatest thing to be looking for, but it is a key sign that you have beetle activity. So it's going to appear almost like sawdust around your tree. Maybe it might be lingering in some of the bark crevices or maybe collecting around the base of the tree. But this is, another red flag that you've got some sort of activity, insect activity on your tree. And then lastly, sap. Trees, they will go through this defense system where if they've got some sort of insect that is doing damage, whether it's the, chewing or those exit holes, the tree will exude that sap to try to stop that activity. So if you're noticing any sap seeping from wounds on the tree, that could be another red flag as well. So if you're seeing any of these things, report, report, report. And then lastly, I wanted to leave everyone with this slide, which is another image from the USDA. And so it's really awesome. They have actually made August the official tree check month. And so what they're asking folks to do is to take 10 minutes out of your day. Look at your trees in your yard, look at your landscape trees a bit closer, or maybe go to the park in your community and do a nice little 10-minute hike and take a closer look at those trees there. And so what you'll be looking for are those 4 things that describe the beetle sign. So those are mentioned again here. But then also, we have to remember that this is a tree killer. So the trees that it's infesting, they're going to have signs of decline. And one of the main things is branch dieback. So if you see a tree that has half of its crown missing and there's some weird holes and things like that, that could be a potential tree of interest. And we would want to know about that. And then lastly, of course, the beetle itself, which is pretty charismatic on its own. So the next major thing to talk about are what trees does this beetle attack? Well, there's about 12 to 13 species that it's known to be found on here in the States. But what we have learned from other states that are dealing with these eradication measures is that these beetles really love maple for whatever reason. But the main tree that they are found in are the various species of maple. So try to pay special attention to those species. And with that, I'm going to stop blabbering and open it up to any questions if there are any. And it looks like my lights for the room have decided to turn off. I'll go turn those back on. I'll be right back.
Sure, that happens.
Automatic lights, gotta love it.
Yeah,
Right?
gotta love it.
Yeah.
Well, we greatly appreciate her presence.
All right.
She's back.
Yeah. We appreciate your presentation, and I'm surprised that they're not picky for one tree. I mean, you said they like maple more, but usually they're like the bug likes one specific tree or a couple of trees, right? Typically.
Exactly. Yeah. So insects typically fall into 2 major categories. They can either be a specialist or a generalist. And so in comparison, I kind of talked about EAB, or the emerald ash borer. That is a specialist. So it only targets the various species of ash, whereas ALB is more of a generalist, and it can pretty much devour any type of tree species that it lands on and likes. But what we have found from these other states that are working to eradicate the beetle, a lot of infestations the heavy infestations are on maples.
So I'm wondering if they've got a sweet tooth then, right? Is there
Maybe.
honestly, a little more sugar in that sap?
Right. Exactly.
Yep.
Not good for our maple producers, or really anybody that has woodlands here in Kentucky, for sure.
Exactly.
Right. So basically what you're asking folks to do is to call if they see any of this kind of the whole
Signs, yeah.
that kind of thing.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. Yeah. All of these different bugs. I mean, my goodness, we just seem to keep getting different ones after different ones. And I mean, it's like, are our forests going to be safe? You know, so.
Well, we have to stay vigilant, you know, and
Exactly.
we're fortunate to have folks like Alexandra and Dr. Crocker who are out there kind of keeping up with things and keeping us alerted. So, you know, the work that you do, Alexandra, in the Kentucky Division of Forestry, along with Dr. Crocker, is just so critical to everything that we get from our woodlands. So thanks for keeping up the good fight and working so hard to try to keep our woodlands healthy.
It's my pleasure. We're doing our best to protect what we have.
No
So
doubt.
And it's
speaking
not-
of another fight.
Yeah, it's not always doom and gloom. There is some hope out there from time to time, right?
Exactly.
Kinda
So
like
we're
what we're going to talk about.
yeah, so I think we've all heard of the emerald ash borer, which is a different invasive insect that has been, you know, attacking our ash trees. And Alexandra, you know, I know you talked about Asian longhorn beetle, and you know, we're looking for it and don't want to see it in Kentucky, right? It's not
Right.
here. We don't want to find it, but if you do find it, it's better to find it early than when it's spread.
What do you do
But-
like if you were to find and you're like, oh, it is in Kentucky, then what do you try to do to keep that from spreading? I mean, what kind of measures are there?
So that would involve APHIS, so the federal folks, we would get them involved, and that would entail, you know, quarantining and regulating those areas, and then the eradication process would start. And unfortunately, you know, it's a lot of government trucks in people's yards and cutting down trees and chipping trees, and it doesn't make folks too happy, but in the end, it's for the best.
Okay.
Yeah, so we don't want to find it, but we'd much rather find it when it's in a tiny pocket than when it's in a big area that has
Yeah.
to deal with that. But the situation with the emerald ash borer is a little different. So right now, the emerald ash borer is all across Kentucky, almost. There's still a few counties out west where we haven't found it yet. Is it probably there and we don't know about it? What do you think, Alexandra?
Yes, so we're currently at 99 out of the 120 counties here in Kentucky that are infested. And it is slowly creeping into the furthest western reaches of our state. And as you mentioned, you know, it could already be in those counties. We just haven't found it yet. You know, it's kind of that needle in the haystack or the single tree that's got the grub in it, and we just haven't found it.
So with the emerald ash borer, the situation isn't where it is with Asian longhorn beetle, in that it's not about eradicating it if we find it and finding, you know, that one little outbreak. It is here. It is everywhere, and it has killed a lot of ash trees. So what Alexandra and I are going to talk with you about next is some work that we're involved with to try to find those trees that are still left. Because while the vast majority of ash has been killed by emerald ash borer or will be killed by emerald ash borer, there does seem to be a little bit of kind of resistance to that, of trees that have some natural defenses to the emerald ash borer, maybe just not attractive to it, that aren't being killed as rapidly or are still living. And we'd like to know the locations of those. If you're seeing them, we want you to report those with the Tree Snap app, because we'd like to maybe use those as part of the key for bringing ash back in the
Trying to
future.
figure out why, you know, there's some kind of, is there some kind of chemical or something that the emerald ash borer doesn't like?
Well,
I mean-
there's been some great research being done by the Forest Service Northern Research Station on that, and they found a whole bunch of different things are impacting why it is that some trees aren't being impacted in the same way. I think the important takeaway is that most of your ash tree do not have this and are going to die. But there are differences between the different species, white and green and blue ash, which are our native ash species here, as well as, you know, some individuals that are going to have some, you know, genetic information that makes them a little bit better about dealing with emerald ash borer. So we've got a video to show you of Alexandra visiting one of our state nature preserves that's looking for what we're calling lingering ash, or ash that is still around. Now, is it, you know, necessarily, does it have something special about it? We don't know. Maybe it's just lucky, which is why we're using that language that again was developed by the Forest Service, but it's still there. And so that's important. And we want you to help document that with the Tree Snap app.
All right, well, we'll show that video.
Right.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alexandra Blevins, and I'm the Forest Health Specialist with the Kentucky Division of Forestry. And so we're out here today at Tom Dorman Nature Preserve, and we are out here looking for some lingering ash. This is one of the strong programs that we have in collaboration with the University of Kentucky Forest Health Extension. And so what we are doing, as you have heard already today about the emerald ash borer, this insect, a beautiful tiny little green beetle, has devastated our ash populations here in the state. And so this lingering ash project or program that we're collaborating with UK on, we are documenting, searching these locations where the majority of the ash has already been taken out. Say 90 to 95% are gone, but there are these lingering or surviving ash that are still here. And we believe these ash to hold certain characteristics, beneficial characteristics that we want to try to harvest from these trees and make a potential future seed orchard at some of our state nurseries. So here at this location, last season we have found several blue pockets of blue ash, and there are also some lingering white ash here as well. And so what we actually do is we come out and we scout at these various locations in northern Kentucky, which Maddie said that was one of our hardest hit areas here in the state. And we'll scout and we look for the surviving ash, we record their location, and we also look for certain signs, whether or not they have seed that year. And we'll mark that down in our database. And then in the fall, when it's the appropriate time to harvest seed, we will get the appropriate approvals, and we'll come back and we can get that seed out of the tree if it's feasible, and take that back to our nursery and get that in the ground for a future seed orchard.
Great. So thank you, Alexandra, for giving us a quick rundown of that and for the work that KDF is doing there. And so what we really want people to do this fall is to be looking around for ash trees that are still healthy, right?
Exactly, yes. And as mentioned in the video, fall is the best time for seed collection for those three species that we have here in the state. So as I've been driving around, I've definitely noticed some ash that are fully packed with seed. So if any of you have those ash that are still looking great and doing well and they've got seed, you know, it's a good thing.
And I think even if you're not collecting the seed this year, even if all you do is just report the location of some trees, that's really useful information, because in the future, maybe someone will email you, be like, is that tree still alive? If so, could you send seeds in and add to the breeding efforts that are being done for ash trees in the future? One of the big challenges with this is, how do we know that the trees that are left are actually, you know, have something special about them versus they're just lucky? Or maybe someone treated them with insecticides and that's why they've made it this far, but they're not actually resistant to emerald ash borer. And so it's important to make sure that we are finding those trees that, you know, truly should have been killed. Everything else around them has been killed, but they're still alive and doing well.
So what happens if all of the ash trees die? Then do the EABs die, or are they going to move to something else?
Well, we have already seen that when emerald ash borer first came through, there were lots and lots of beetles, right? So they were really high population levels because there was a lot of ash around. But now there's not that much big ash around. So those beetle populations, at least depending on where you are in the state, but certainly in like northern and central Kentucky, are much lower. However, what you are seeing a lot of is a lot of ash in the understory, like ash seedlings that are coming up. And those will probably be killed by emerald ash borer in the future. I think there's still some uncertainty about what that's going to look like and how that's going to impact those beetle populations. Alexandra, did you want to share some more information about that?
Yes, of course. So just to echo what you said, definitely in my travels across the state, seeing a lot of the ash region, which is great. But the research tells us that, the emerald ash borer will infest anything that's an inch in diameter or larger. So, as those trees continue to grow in the understory, there is a high potential that they will become infested, unfortunately. So, that's a big question mark for what the future will hold with our ash populations here in Kentucky.
I think long term, we're going to have to deal with emerald ash borer, from here on out. And so, it's not going to be feasible to treat all of your trees with insecticide. It's a great option for protecting individual trees in the landscape. But long term, finding some trees that can defend themselves against the emerald ash borer is going to be key to keeping ash on the landscape.
Yep.
And you might be wondering, all right, I've heard of this. I want to look for some ash, but what do ash look like? And how do I know if I have an ash or I have something else entirely?
Right.
So we've got a short video as well to kind of walk through some of those ID characteristics.
That'd be great. That way we know what we're looking for.
Yeah. All right, I'll get it going.
Great.
We have 3 species of ash that are commonly found in Kentucky: white ash, green ash, and blue ash. Ash are all members of the family Oleaceae. These are trees and shrubs that have opposite leaves and opposite branches. Ash ID is actually pretty easy. So all of the ash that we have in Kentucky are going to have compound leaves. That means that there's more than one leaflet per leaf. So rather than one large round leaf, you have a central rachis with multiple leaflets coming off of it, like this. They're always opposite. The leaves are usually rounded. The leaflets are usually rounded. And the buds on ash are very pointy. They are usually dark in color. Some people think that they look kind of like a Phillips head screwdriver. Ash fruit are called samaras. They're small canoe paddle shaped fruits that hang in clusters off of the branches of the trees. And these little fruits are windborne, so in the fall when they're ready to be dispersed, the wind will grab them and whisk them away to make new ash trees someplace else. Ash bark is a really useful characteristic for ash ID. White and green ash tend to have interlacing bark. It looks kind of like a woven diamond pattern. And with white ash, sometimes you'll see white patches on the boles of the trees as well. So remember, white ash, white patch. Blue ash look a little bit different. Blue ash actually have square stems and square branches. That's why the species name on blue ash is quadrangulata, so 4-sided. So if you look at little blue ash, you'll see that they have little square stems and the branches are squared as well. And with blue ash, the leaflets are also slightly different. They're a little more serrated and a little bit smaller than what you'll see on white or green ash.
Great. So special thank you to Megan Buellin for putting that video together. But if you want to learn more, make sure to check out our Tree of the Week series that Lori Thomas does. She's got some profiles of ash species that can get you started in the right direction. So while you're out checking your tree, check for Asian longhorn beetle. Make sure you don't have it and report it if you've got any questions. And also make sure you're looking around for those ash tree that might be still there and still healthy when everything else around them is dead.
So the lingering ash, are there specific ones that, like, is it blue or white? Like, are there more blues that are left, or is it just a variant between those?
Yeah, that's a great point. And, white and green ash, while they're different species and they grow in different places, they're both similarly decimated by the emerald ash borer. So white ash is probably the more important timber species in our state, but they're both pretty common species, green ash as well, and both kind of in our woods and natural areas as well as in landscapes. But they are both, really killed by the emerald ash borer versus blue ash, which is a little bit more resistant. And it's thought that, white ash and green ash are more similar genetically, and blue ash is just less attractive to the beetle. It might have more similarities to some of the ash species that beetle grew up with in Asia. So there are differences between those species, and those are just the species that we have in Kentucky. In other parts of the country, there are going to be other native ash species.
So are we seeing any other species in that family being impacted? in the Oleaceae.
Definitely. We don't have a lot of other species in that family in Kentucky, but there is white fringe tree that you might be familiar with. And it's my understanding white fringe tree grows a little bit differently from ash. It can have a multi-stemmed form, and that it is not as bad on white fringe tree as it is on, white and green ash. Alexandra, do you want to comment on that or any other kind of things to look for emerald ash borer?
Yes, well, I've only seen the infestation in the white fringe tree on a landowner's landscape tree. I haven't personally seen it on the natural landscape, but
Same here.
yeah. And in regard to blue ash, definitely I've seen it attacked, but the neat thing is when the grub form will start its gallery, so it's eating away these blue ash trees. They can callus over the gallery of the insect, and they'll actually kill the insect outright by healing over that wound. So that's pretty neat to see out when you're hiking around. So maybe take a special look at those blue ash and see if you can find any of those.
Yeah, forest health is sometimes all doom and gloom, but our trees are pretty resilient too, and it's amazing what they can do. And I'd say, in addition to, if you're thinking about, how can you manage emerald ash borer in your trees, there's definitely looking to see if any of them are still doing well, have that potential resistance. There are insecticide treatment options, but also there are researchers who are looking at biological controls. Parasitoid insects that might attack emerald ash borer. And there's all sorts of exciting research that's being done right now to try to make sure we don't lose ash on the landscape and that we can bring it back faster. Because we've seen with things like the American chestnut that we talked about a few weeks ago, we really lost that across our landscape. And at this point, it's hard to bring it back. That spot no longer exists. So really trying to accelerate that progress with ash. We know a lot more now than we did when American chestnut kind of was killed off by that blight.
Just amazes me though that these bugs, beetles, can actually like gnaw away, that their mouth parts are that strong that they can actually gnaw away at that wood. I mean, it just blows my mind that something that small can do that much damage in wood,
I agree. It's amazing. They're morphologically just built like bodybuilders, I guess. They're mandibles.
A bodybuilder bug.
They're pretty tough for their body weight, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, definitely. So to recap, our section today on forest health, we want you. We need your help with our forest health issues. So today we talked about Asian longhorn beetle. If you see anything that's suspicious like Asian longhorn beetle, make sure that you report it. You can report that to Kentucky Division of Forestry. You can report that to your county agent. You can snap a picture and put it in iNaturalist. Just share that with someone, because we'd rather catch that. And that's true for anything else. If you're seeing something unusual, something that's causing kind of widespread symptoms in lots of trees, it might not be Asian longhorn beetle. It might be some other thing we don't want to see and would like to contain, whether it's thousand cankers disease or laurel wilt disease. If you're seeing any kind of tree death or symptoms like that, report those. And best case scenario, it's nothing or something minor. And if not, maybe we can contain it before it spreads.
While you're out there.
Bug.
Oh, sorry. I was
No,
going
go
to say,
ahead.
you can look for other things while you're out there as well, right? So make the most of it. Invasive plants or any other issues going on in your woods. So get out there. If you see something cool, take a picture of it, send it to us. We might talk about it on a future show.
Hey, we've done it before. We'll do it again.
And thanks, Alexandra, for talking with folks today. And if you don't know your local forester, make sure you do. And if you have any questions that come up, you can reach out to Alexandra.
I'd be more than happy to help.
Yeah, keep up the good fight, Alexandra. Thank you so much.
Thank you both for being on today. We greatly
No doubt.
appreciate it.
Yeah, Dr. Crocker, appreciate all your efforts leading our forest health efforts. So
Yep.
Cool.
It's always a pleasure. Thank
Yep.
you all.
All right.
All
take care.
right.
All right.
So, you know, Martha's getting ready to
I'm
make us
starting to
hungry.
smell something smell good.
Yeah, smell something good. Martha, what's this pie look like?
Okay, well, I'm going to do my best to show you. You'll have to tell me which way to move the camera.
Okay. Oh, we're looking
Tell-
good. Oh,
Yeah, okay.
yeah.
All right. Well, it smells good. I'm sorry you can't smell it.
We need some smell-o-vision, right?
Yeah. Tilt down a little bit.
There you go.
Okay.
A little bit more.
Yeah, tilt down so we can see it there.
There you go. Wow, look at that.
Be a nice lunch.
It would be, yes.
Oh.
Well, thank you so much. That is so good. It looks so good, and we'll have to try that recipe at home, and we'll definitely give everybody who is interested any recipe tips for.
Yeah, no doubt. And if
Yeah.
something you missed it, check back. We'll have the recording posted soon, and you can check it out there.
We will. You know, Ellen put in there, do you deliver? I'm hungry. So, you know, speaking of our recordings, every recording we've ever done for every show is on fromthewoodstoday.com. So if you ever miss anything or you want to get that recipe and see how Martha did that, then you can go ahead and go there, and we should have that posted soon.
Yeah, no doubt. We've covered so many different things over the last few years on this program. So almost guaranteed, if you've got some curiosity or interest in woodlands and wildlife and our natural resources, there's probably a topic that we've covered on that. So check it out, you know, and also let others know. There's a lot of folks out there that would probably appreciate learning some of this information and connecting with a lot of the organizations and agencies that are out there to kind of help our woodland owners and those who support them take care of our woodlands.
Definitely. You know, I think we're done for today, but you know, we got to go get some lunch because that just.
Yeah, I know. She's made us hungry. Thanks, Martha.
Thanks, Martha. We appreciate that. But we greatly appreciate you joining us, and we will see you again next week at 11. Take care.
Yeah, bye, everyone.
From the woods today.